A powerful man given no hope by doctors decides to walk toward the end with the dignity of those who expect nothing more. But upon crossing paths with a hungry, invisible child, his death gives way to an unlikely rebirth. Each of her gestures healed his invisible wounds, while he taught her that belonging doesn't depend on the past. And now, he no longer fights for his own life, he fights to secure her future. If you love great stories, please subscribe to our channel and comment where you're from. We continue. The Manhattan skyline cut through the morning fog like steel giants standing guard over the city. Robert Harrison stared out the window of his penthouse office, the view that once symbolized his triumph now seeming oddly distant. At 63, he had conquered the business world with Harrison Enterprises, a real estate empire that stretched across 17 states. Every architectural award, every business magazine cover, every billion added to his net worth had come at a price, though he'd never bothered to calculate it until today. 6 months, possibly less, Dr. Larson had said this morning, his voice clinically detached, yet tinged with that practiced sympathy reserved for terminal diagnoses. There are treatments that might extend that time frame, but I need to be honest with you. They would only buy weeks, not years, and the quality of life would be significantly diminished. Robert hadn't flinched. He'd spent decades making billion-dollar decisions without showing emotion. This was just another problem to manage. But as he stood watching New York continue its relentless pace below, something unfamiliar crept through his veins. Not fear, but a strange hollowness, as if he could already feel himself becoming a ghost. "Sir?" His assistant, Jennifer, appeared at the door. "The board is waiting in the conference room." "Tell them I'll be there shortly," Robert replied, his voice steady. He straightened his tie, a ritual that had preceded thousands of meetings. This one, however, would be different from all others. 20 minutes later, Robert had informed his board of directors about his condition and his decision to step back from daily operations. Stunned silence followed, then the expected corporate platitudes and awkward expressions of sympathy. These were people who had worked alongside him for years, yet none knew him beyond boardroom strategies and annual galas. Not that Robert had ever invited more. "I'd like some privacy for the remainder of the day," he told Jennifer after the meeting. "Cancel my appointments." For the first time in 38 years, Robert Harrison left his office in the middle of a workday. He dismissed his driver, ignored the town car waiting curbside, and simply walked. He had no destination in mind, just an urgent need to step outside the carefully constructed world that now seemed like an elaborate mausoleum. His expensive shoes, designed for boardrooms and not sidewalks, carried him past the gleaming storefronts of Fifth Avenue, through the manicured paths of Central Park, and eventually to neighborhoods his real estate assessors would have marked for development opportunities. The further he walked from Midtown, the more the city transformed. Graffiti-covered walls, buildings with character rather than prestige, people who didn't wear power as a uniform. By late afternoon, Robert found himself in a small playground in Queens. His body, unaccustomed to such extended exertion, protested with each step. He sat heavily on a bench, watching children climb on playground equipment while their guardians chatted nearby. Family scenes that had always seemed as foreign, to him as distant planets. That's when he noticed her. She sat alone at the edge of the playground, thin legs dangling from a low wall. Perhaps 8 or 9 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and clothes that had clearly seen better days. What struck Robert wasn't her obvious poverty. It was the way she watched the other children with both longing and resignation, like someone viewing a world through unbreakable glass. As the afternoon wore on, parents collected their children, the playground emptying as dinner time approached. Still, the girl remained. Robert observed as she eventually slipped behind the recreation center building. Curiosity, something he rarely indulged, compelled him to follow at a distance. Behind the building, the girl had set up what could only be described as a makeshift camp, a worn backpack, a tattered sleeping bag partially hidden behind a dumpster, and a collection of carefully arranged treasures, colorful stones, a half-broken toy horse, a faded photograph in a cracked frame. "Are you following me?" The girl's voice startled him. She stood defensively, eyes narrowed with suspicion that no child her age should possess. "I noticed you were alone," Robert replied, suddenly aware how suspicious he must appear, an older man in expensive clothing following a child. "I'm not alone. My mom's coming back soon." The lie was transparent, delivered with practiced defiance. Robert nodded, pretending to accept it. "Of course. I apologize for bothering you." He reached for his wallet, intending to offer money, but stopped. The gesture suddenly seemed insulting. Instead, he asked, "When did you last eat something?" "The meaty," girl's defiance faltered slightly. "Yesterday, maybe." "Would you allow me to buy you dinner? There's a diner across the street." Her eyes narrowed further. "My mom says not to go with strangers." "Your mother is absolutely right," Robert agreed. "How about we eat at that table right there?" He pointed to a public picnic table near the playground, visible from the street. "I'll go get the food and bring it back. You can wait here." 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other, at the weathered table. The girl, who still hadn't offered her name, devoured a burger, fries, and milkshake with the focused intensity of genuine hunger. "Do you have a name?" Robert finally asked. She hesitated, evaluating him while sipping her milkshake. "Lily," she finally offered. Just one word, no last name. "I'm Robert." "You're rich," she stated matter-of-factly. He smiled slightly. "What makes you say that? Your watch costs more than a car, and nobody in this neighborhood wears shoes like yours." "Observant," Robert noted. "Where are your parents, Lily? Really?" The directness of his question seemed to surprise her. She set down her burger. "Don't have any. Mom left 2 months ago, said she'd be back." She shrugged with practiced indifference. "She's not coming back." "What about other family? Grandparents, aunts, or uncles?" "No one wants me." The simplicity of her statement made it all the more devastating. "And social services?" Lily's face hardened. "Foster care is worse than being on my own. At least here, nobody hits me." They sat in silence as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the playground. Robert found himself facing a decision that seemed to come from somewhere outside his rational mind. Perhaps it was the diagnosis making him reckless, or perhaps it was seeing something in this child that resonated with his own well-disguised loneliness. "I have a guest room," he said finally. "It's yours if you want it. Just for tonight." "Aye. Shower, clean clothes, proper bed. Tomorrow we can figure out something better for you." Lily studied him with eyes too old for her face. Why would you do that? It was a fair question, one Robert wasn't entirely sure he could answer. "Because I can," he finally said. "And because maybe we both could use the company." As they walked toward the main avenue to hail a taxi, Robert realized his body wasn't aching anymore. For the first time since his diagnosis, he wasn't thinking about the limited days ahead. Instead, he found himself wondering what kind of breakfast a child might prefer. The taxi driver gave them a curious look as Robert provided his Upper East Side address, glancing in the rearview mirror at the unlikely pair they made. A corporate titan and a homeless child, separated by worlds of experience, yet somehow finding themselves at the same intersection of need. "Is your house big?" Lily asked as they crossed the Queensboro Bridge, the Manhattan skyline now lit against the darkening sky. "Too big," Robert admitted, "for just one person." Lily pressed her face against the window, watching the city transform as they moved, from borough to borough. "I've never been to Manhattan," she confessed quietly. Robert watched her expression of wonder and felt something unfamiliar stir within him, not pity, but a strange protectiveness he'd never experienced before. Tomorrow would bring complications, questions, authorities, but tonight he could offer safety, comfort, and dignity to a child the world had forgotten. For a man who had been given a countdown to his final day, it felt oddly like a beginning. Lily stood frozen in the foyer of Robert's penthouse, her small backpack clutched tightly against her chest. The marble floors gleamed under recessed lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a glittering Manhattan panorama that seemed to belong to another universe entirely. Her wide eyes darted from the minimalist furnishings to the abstract paintings that adorned the walls, each likely worth more than most families made in a year. "This isn't a house," she finally said. "It's like a museum." Robert followed her, gaze around the space he'd occupied for 15 years without ever truly seeing it. Through Lily's eyes, he suddenly recognized the sterile perfection of his home, designed by a renowned interior decorator who had never asked what might make him happy, only what would impress others. "It's not very homey, is it?" he admitted. Lily shook her head, still not moving from the entryway, as if afraid her presence might contaminate the pristine environment. "The guest room is this way," Robert said, leading her down a hallway. "There's a bathroom attached. Use whatever you need." The guest suite, like the rest of the apartment, was impeccably appointed, but devoid of personality. Lily approached the king-sized bed cautiously, pressing a hand against the mattress as if testing whether it might swallow her whole. "I'll find you something to sleep in," Robert offered, realizing he owned nothing remotely suitable for a child. "And we can get you some proper clothes tomorrow." When he returned with a soft t-shirt, that would serve as a nightgown, Lily had not moved from her spot beside the bed. "Are you hungry again? I could order something." She shook her head. "I just don't understand why you're doing this." The question caught Robert off guard. Throughout his business career, motivations had always been clear: profit, expansion, legacy. But why had he brought this child home? The truth was complicated, perhaps tied to his diagnosis in ways he wasn't ready to examine. "Sometimes people just help each other," he said simply. "Get cleaned up, rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." Later that night, unable to sleep, Robert found himself standing in the hallway outside the guest room. The door was slightly ajar. He'd noticed Lily's reluctance to be completely enclosed in the unfamiliar space. From his position, he could see her small form curled tightly on one edge of the massive bed, as if afraid to claim too much territory. For the first time in decades, Robert Harrison felt his heart ache for someone other than himself. Morning arrived with unfamiliar sounds in Robert's typically silent apartment: water running, cabinet doors opening and closing. He found Lily in the kitchen, stretching on tiptoes to reach a glass in an upper cabinet. "Let me help you," he offered, reaching past her. She jumped slightly at his voice. "Sorry, I was thirsty." "No need to apologize. This is your home for now. Use whatever you need." The phrase "your home" hung in the air between them, foreign and uncertain. After an awkward breakfast of the only child-friendly food in Robert's pantry, expensive organic granola, he realized the immediacy of practical matters. "You need clothes, toiletries, probably a dozen other things I haven't thought of," he said. "We should go shopping." Lily looked down at her worn sneakers. "I don't have any money." "I'm buying," Robert said firmly. "Consider it rent for keeping me company." The Tassie shopping expedition proved educational for both of them. Robert, accustomed to having his assistant handle personal purchases, found himself navigating children's departments with complete bewilderment. Lily, clearly unused to new things, selected the most basic, inexpensive items despite his encouragement to choose freely. "You need more than 3 shirts," Robert insisted when she declared herself finished after selecting the bare minimum. "This is already too much," she protested quietly. A salesperson approached, offering assistance that Robert gratefully accepted. Under professional guidance, they assembled a proper wardrobe, though Lily remained uncomfortable with each addition. It was at lunch in a casual cafe afterward that Robert noticed her stealing glances at a nearby family, parents and 2 children, laughing together over shared desserts. Something in her expression made his chest tighten. "Lily," he began carefully, "we need to discuss next steps. I should contact social services. They can help find you a proper home, a family." "No." Her response was immediate and fierce. "Please don't. They'll put me in the system. I've been there before. It's bad." "Not all foster homes are bad," Robert suggested gently. "Enough of them are." The adult weariness in her young voice was jarring. "Please, just let me stay a few more days. I won't be any trouble. I can even help clean or something." Robert hesitated. Legally, he knew the right course of action, but something, perhaps the desperation in her eyes or perhaps his own selfish desire for companionship in his final months, made him nod. "A few more days?" he agreed, "but we'll need a better solution eventually." Back at the penthouse, Robert received a call from his doctor about follow-up appointments and treatment options. He took the call in his office, speaking in hushed tones. When he emerged, he found Lily sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, examining the built-in bookshelf with curiosity. "You have so many books," she observed. "Have you read all of them?" "Most," Robert admitted. "Reading has always been my escape." "I like reading too," she said, pulling out a worn copy of The Secret Garden. "We had this at one of my foster homes, the nice one." "You can borrow anything you'd like," Robert offered. "Can I read here?" she asked, gesturing to the plush rug. "The light is good." "Of course." As Lily settled with the book, Robert found himself at loose ends. Normally, even on weekends, he would be working, reviewing reports, making calls, planning his next business conquest. But today, the laptop stayed closed. Instead, he selected his own book and settled into an armchair near where Lily read on the floor. They passed the afternoon in companionable silence, occasionally exchanging comments about their books. Robert couldn't remember the last time he'd spent hours simply reading for pleasure, with no purpose beyond enjoyment. That evening, Robert ordered dinner from his usual high-end delivery service, but Lily picked at the unfamiliar gourmet food. "Not to your taste?" he asked. She shrugged apologetically. "It's fancy, I'm not used to it." "What would you prefer?" "Anything at all." Her face brightened. "Could we have pizza? With pepperoni?" 20 minutes later, Robert Harrison, whose dining experiences typically involved Michelin-starred restaurants, found himself eating pepperoni pizza straight from the box on his kitchen counter. Lily's delight in the simple meal was infectious, and he discovered he was enjoying the greasy, unpretentious food more than any elaborate tasting menu he'd experienced recently. "This is way better," Lily declared, reaching for another slice. After dinner, another awkward moment arose when bedtime approached. Robert had no experience with children's routines. "Do you need anything, a glass of water, another book?" he asked uncertainly. Lily seemed equally unsure. "I'm okay. Thank you for today, for everything." "You're welcome, Lily." As she turned to go to her room, she hesitated, then looked back at him. "Why are you being so nice to me, really?" The question deserved honesty, but Robert wasn't sure he fully understood his own motivations. Was it pity? Loneliness? A desire to do something meaningful with his remaining time? "I've spent my whole life focused on business," he said slowly. "Building things, making money, expanding my influence, but I never built anything that really mattered. Maybe I'm trying to change that, even if it's just by helping one person." Lily studied him with that penetrating gaze that seemed too knowing for her years. "Are you sick? I heard you on the phone with the doctor." Robert stiffened. "What makes you ask that?" "You look tired sometimes, and you take pills when you think I'm not looking." "I have some health issues," he admitted, not wanting to burden her with the full truth. "Nothing for you to worry about." Later, that night, lying awake in his bed, Robert contemplated the strange turn his life had taken. A week ago, he'd been a man with a terminal diagnosis and no meaningful connections, preparing for a lonely end. Now he found himself responsible for a child he barely knew, feeling more alive than he had in years, despite the illness progressing inside him. An idea began to form, something impulsive and probably inadvisable, yet increasingly compelling. Why not use his remaining time and considerable resources to secure Lily's future? He had no heirs, no family waiting for his fortune. His estate would ultimately go to various charitable foundations selected by his lawyers, worthy causes, but impersonal. But here was Lily, intelligent, resilient, deserving of opportunities that life had thus far denied her. What if he could? Give her not just temporary shelter, but a permanent foundation for a better life? As dawn approached, Robert made his decision. He would offer Lily something no one else had, a chance to become his legal heir. It was unorthodox, perhaps even reckless, but for the first time in decades, Robert was following his heart rather than his business acumen. And strangely, As he finally drifted towards sleep, the constant awareness of his illness that had shadowed him since diagnosis seemed somehow less oppressive, less defining. Perhaps, he thought, in helping to save Lily, he might find a different kind of healing for himself. 2 weeks had passed since Lily entered Robert's life, transforming his sterile penthouse into something that was beginning to resemble a home. Small changes accumulated daily. Colorful throw pillows on the once pristine sofa, a child's toothbrush beside his in the master bathroom, refrigerator magnets holding up Lily's drawings. Robert found himself enjoying these disruptions to his formerly perfect order. That morning, as they shared breakfast, a ritual that had quickly become his favorite part of the day, Robert decided it was time to share his idea. "Lily, there's something important I'd like to discuss with you," he began, setting down his coffee cup. She immediately tensed, her hand freezing midway to her mouth, a spoonful of cereal suspended in air. "Are you sending me away?" The fear in her voice made Robert's chest tighten. "No, absolutely not. Just the opposite, actually." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, but wariness remained in her eyes. Robert realized how fragile her sense of security still was. How many times she must have been disappointed by adults making promises they didn't keep. "I've been thinking about our situation," he continued carefully. "About making this arrangement more permanent." "You mean I could stay longer?" Hope flickered across her face. "I mean you could stay indefinitely, legally." Robert took a deep breath. "Lily, would you consider allowing me to become your guardian, your adoptive father, eventually?" Her spoon clattered against the bowl. "You want to adopt me, like for real?" "Yes, and more than that, I'd like to make you my heir." "What's an heir?" "Someone who inherits what you leave behind. In my case, that's quite substantial." Robert gestured around them. "The company, the properties, the investments, everything would be yours someday." Lily's eyes widened. "But why me? You barely know me." It was a fair question, one his lawyers would certainly ask when he informed them of his intentions. But the answer to Robert had become increasingly clear. "Because in just 2 weeks, you've brought more meaning to my life than decades of business success ever did," he said simply. "And because every child deserves someone who chooses them, who fights for them. I'd like to be that person for you if you'll let me." Lily stared at him, her expression a complex mixture of hope, disbelief, and lingering caution. "What if you change your mind?" "I won't," Robert promised. "But I understand why you'd worry about that. We can take this step by step, see how things go, no pressure." She considered this, stirring her cereal thoughtfully. "Would I have to call you Dad?" The question caught Robert off guard. "You can call me whatever makes you comfortable. I think I'd like to call you Robert for now," she said carefully. "But maybe someday the other thing." "That sounds perfect." He smiled, unexpectedly moved by the possibility contained in her someday. "So what happens now?" Lily asked. "Now we talk to lawyers, social workers, and judges. It's a process and it might get complicated. But I'm good at complicated negotiations." He winked, earning a small smile from her. "And while that's happening, we get to know each other better. Build our family one day at a time." That afternoon, Robert made calls to set the legal process in motion. His longtime attorney, James Whitfield, listened in stunned silence to Robert's plans. "You want to adopt a homeless child you found in a park?" James finally asked, his voice heavy with concern. "Robert, I understand your diagnosis has been difficult, but this seems impulsive." "It's the least impulsive decision I've ever made," Robert countered. "For once, I'm thinking about something beyond the next acquisition or market expansion. The courts will scrutinize this heavily. A single man with no parenting experience, your age, your health issues, my considerable resources, my ability to provide educational opportunities, stability, inheritance planning," Robert interrupted. "Focus on the positives, James. That's what I pay you for." After arranging an appointment with James for the following day, Robert turned his attention to another matter, his health. Though he hadn't mentioned it to Lily, he had a follow-up appointment with Dr. Larson that afternoon. "I'll be going out for a few hours," he told Lily, who was absorbed in a new book they'd purchased. "Will you be okay here? Mrs. Rivera will be cleaning, so you won't be alone." She nodded without looking up. Where are you going? Robert hesitated. A meeting. Boring business stuff. Her eyes flicked up, studying him with that unnervingly perceptive gaze. Is it a doctor meeting? Robert sighed. This child missed nothing. Yes, it is. Just a checkup. For your sickness that you don't talk about. Lily... It's okay, she interrupted. You don't have to tell me, but I know something's wrong. I'm not a baby. Robert sat beside her on the couch. You're right, you deserve honesty. I have an illness that's serious. I'm getting treatment, but the doctors aren't sure how effective it will be. Lily absorbed this, her face remarkably composed. Are you going to die? The bluntness of the question, delivered without euphemism, was jarring but somehow appropriate. Everyone passes eventually, he said carefully. My condition means it might happen sooner than I'd like. But I'm fighting it, especially now that I have something important to live for. She closed her book, marking her place with a finger. Is that why you want to adopt me? Because you're sick? That was the catalyst, perhaps, Robert admitted. Finding out my time might be limited made me reevaluate what matters. But meeting you, getting to know you, that's why I want to adopt you. Because you're remarkable, Lily. She seemed to accept this, nodding slowly. You should get better medicine then. The best kind. I'm trying, he promised. At Dr. Larson's office, Robert was surprised when the oncologist studied his latest test results with a puzzled expression. This is unexpected, Dr. Larson murmured, comparing charts on his computer screen. Bad unexpected? Robert asked, bracing himself. Actually, no, there's a notable decrease in tumor size since your last scan. It's not dramatic, but it's definitely not the progression we anticipated. What does that mean? It could be a delayed response to your initial treatments or possibly... Dr. Larson hesitated. Sometimes we see unusual responses in patients whose circumstances change significantly. Major life events, shifts in mental outlook. The mind-body connection is powerful in ways we don't fully understand. Robert thought of Lily waiting at home, probably reading in the exact spot where he'd left her. So you're saying I might be improving because I'm happier? I wouldn't go that far scientifically, Dr. Larson cautioned. But there's something to be said for having a purpose beyond one's own survival. It affects stress hormones, immune function, even how medications are metabolized. What about the experimental treatment you mentioned before, the one I declined? Given these results, it might be worth reconsidering. With this positive trend, you could be an excellent candidate. Robert left the office with something he hadn't expected: hope. Not certainty, not a guaranteed cure, but a glimpse of possibility that hadn't existed before. He found himself stopping at a toy store on the way home, purchasing the bicycle he'd noticed Lily admiring in a commercial days earlier. When he arrived home, the apartment was unusually quiet. "Lily!" he called, wheeling the bicycle into the foyer. No answer. A moment of panic seized him before he heard muffled voices from the kitchen. He found Lily and Mrs. Rivera, his housekeeper, at the kitchen island. The countertop was dusted with flour, and both were focused intently on rolling out dough. "What's happening here?" he asked, amused. Lily looked up, flour streaking her cheek. "Mrs. Rivera is teaching me to make empanadas. She says they were her grandmother's recipe." The older woman smiled apologetically. The young señorita was interested in cooking. "I hope it's okay, Mr. Harrison." "More than okay," Robert assured her. "It smells wonderful." "Robert," Lily suddenly noticed the bicycle. Is that for me?" "I thought we could learn together," he said. "There's a bike path along the river. Mrs. Rivera's empanadas can be our reward after our first lesson." Later at the Riverside Park, Robert held the bicycle steady while Lily perched nervously on the seat. "I've never had a bike before," she admitted. "I'll hold on until you're ready," he promised. "Just find your balance." They spent an hour practicing, Lily's initial wobbles gradually becoming more confident pedaling. When she finally managed to ride several yards independently, her triumphant laugh echoed across the park. Robert found himself laughing too, his body filled with an energy that defied his diagnosis. That evening, as they enjoyed Mrs. Rivera's empanadas on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the Manhattan skyline in gold and pink. Lily asked, "What did the doctor say today? About your sickness?" Robert considered sugarcoating the truth, but decided against it. "Actually, there's some improvement. Small, but positive." "That's good," she said with such certainty that Robert couldn't help but believe it too. "I knew you'd get better." "Oh? How did you know?" She shrugged, taking another bite of empanada. "Because you have to. We have bike riding to practice." The simple logic of a child, so clear, so uncluttered by adult complexities. Robert found himself nodding. "You're right. We have a lot of things to practice." The days that followed established new routines. Mornings began with breakfast together, followed by educational activities Robert arranged. Tutors to assess Lily's academic level, books selected to nurture her evident love of reading, museum visits that sparked endless questions. Afternoons often included physical activities, more bicycle practice, swimming lessons at his building's pool, walks exploring different neighborhoods. Robert adjusted his work schedule drastically, delegating more than he ever had before. His executive team was bewildered by his sudden shift in priorities, but he offered no explanations beyond personal matters. Meanwhile, the legal process of becoming Lily's guardian proceeded. Social workers visited, evaluating the living situation. Background checks were conducted. James worked diligently, leveraging Robert's resources and reputation to navigate bureaucratic challenges. "The judge seems cautiously receptive," James reported after a preliminary hearing. "Your financial stability is obviously a plus. The concerns are your health and lack of parenting experience." "I'm addressing both," Robert replied confidently. "My latest medical reports show improvement, and I've enrolled in parenting classes." James raised an eyebrow. "Parenting classes? You?" "Why is that surprising? I've mastered more complex subjects." "It's just unexpected." "You've changed, Robert." It was true. The transformation was evident not just in his priorities, but in his physical appearance. The constant tension that had lined his face for decades had softened. He smiled more. Even his posture had changed, less rigid, more open. Dr. Larson confirmed the trend at Robert's next appointment. "Your latest scans show continued improvement. Not a miracle, but definitely positive. I'd like to start the experimental treatment next week." "Whatever it takes," Robert agreed. "I have plans that require a future." Those plans expanded daily. As he and Lily grew closer, they created a bucket list together, places to visit, skills to learn, books to read. The list covered the refrigerator door, growing whenever one of them had a new idea. It represented something Robert had never really had before, a future focused on experiences rather than acquisitions. One evening, as Robert tucked Lily into bed, a ritual they'd established that gave structure to their days, she asked sleepily, "If I become your heir, what does that mean I have to do?" "Do? Nothing, really. It just means you'll inherit what I've built." She considered this, her eyes serious in the soft lamplight. "But your company builds things, right? Buildings and stuff." "Yes, among other investments." "So I'd have to learn how to do that." Robert smiled. "Only if you wanted to. You could hire people to manage it all and become a veterinarian or an astronaut or whatever you dream of being." "But what if I wanted to learn about your business?" Something warm spread through Robert's chest. "Then I'd teach you everything I know. But there's no pressure. That's the point of security. It gives you freedom to choose." Lily nodded, satisfied with this answer. "I think I'd like to learn some of it, not all at once, but some." "We can start any time you'd like," Robert promised. "But for now, sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." "Why? What's tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," Robert said, "we find out if the judge will grant me temporary guardianship, the first official step to becoming a family." "A family," Lily repeated the word as if testing how it felt in her mouth. "I like that word." "So do I," Robert agreed, gently brushing her hair back from her forehead. "More than I ever realized." The courthouse seemed unnecessarily imposing. To Lily, who clutched Robert's hand tightly as they climbed the broad stone steps. She wore a new dress for the occasion, navy blue with white trim selected during a shopping trip, where Robert had surrendered all decision-making to a kind salesperson after Lily declared everything he suggested too fancy. "Nervous?" Robert asked, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "A little," she admitted. "What if the judge doesn't like me?" "Impossible," Robert replied with conviction. "But remember, this hearing is more about evaluating me than you. The judge wants to make sure I can provide a good home." Inside, they met James Whitfield, who reviewed the procedure one final time. The hearing should be straightforward. The judge will ask some questions, review the social worker's report, and hopefully grant temporary guardianship pending the full adoption process. When they entered the courtroom, Robert was surprised by how intimate the setting was. Family court. Hearings were conducted in smaller chambers, rather than the grand courtrooms depicted in television dramas. Judge Eleanor Martinez, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, presided. "Mr. Harrison," she began after introductions, "I've reviewed your petition for temporary guardianship of Lily. Your financial qualifications are obviously more than adequate, but I have some questions about your motivations and preparedness for parenting." Robert answered with an honesty that surprised even himself, acknowledging his lack of experience, but emphasizing his commitment to learning. "I've never been a father, Your Honor, but Lily has already taught me more about what matters in life than decades in business ever did." Judge Martinez then turned her attention to Lily, her tone gentler. "Lily, how do you feel about living with Mr. Harrison permanently?" Lily, who had been silent since entering the courtroom, straightened her shoulders. "Robert makes me feel safe," she said simply, "and he doesn't make promises he can't keep." Something in her phrasing caught the judge's attention. "Has that happened to you before? Adults making promises they didn't keep?" Lily nodded. "My mum said she'd come back. The first foster family said I could stay forever, but then they had their own baby and didn't want me anymore. The second family just wanted the government money." The judge's expression softened further. "And you believe Mr. Harrison is different? He could have just given me money or called social services that first day," Lily reasoned. "But he didn't. He helped me himself. That's different." After additional testimony from the social worker assigned to their case, who reported favorably on the home environment Robert had created, Judge Martinez granted temporary guardianship. "This is the first step," she explained. "We'll schedule a follow-up hearing in 6 months to evaluate the arrangement before proceeding to permanent adoption. In the meantime, Lily will remain in your care, Mr. Harrison, and regular visits from social services will continue." As they left the courthouse, Lily's steps were lighter. "We did it," she exclaimed once they reached the sidewalk. "The first step," Robert cautioned, though he couldn't suppress his own smile. "We have more hurdles ahead. But yes, we did it." To celebrate, they visited the Central Park Zoo, followed by ice cream at Lily's favorite parlor, a small family-owned shop they'd discovered during one of their neighborhood explorations. As Lily happily devoured a mint chocolate chip cone, Robert received a text from James. "Urgent matter related to guardianship. Call when you can." Excusing himself briefly while Lily remained safely in view, Robert stepped outside to call his attorney. "What's happened?" he asked immediately. "A woman named Melissa Turner has come forward," James explained. "She claims to be Lily's maternal aunt and is contesting the guardianship." Robert felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Lily's never mentioned an aunt. Did you verify her claim?" "She provided a birth certificate showing she's the sister of Lily's mother, Rachel Turner. Technically, as a blood relative, she would have priority in guardianship proceedings unless proven unfit." "How did she even know about the hearing?" "Court records for guardianship proceedings aren't sealed. She says she's been searching for Lily since her sister disappeared." Robert glanced through the window at Lily, who was chatting animatedly with the ice cream shop owner. The thought of losing her to a stranger with a biological claim sent a surge of protectiveness through him. "What's our next step?" "I've requested an emergency hearing for next week. In the meantime, your temporary guardianship remains in effect." "I'll need to investigate this woman thoroughly." "Do whatever's necessary," Robert instructed. "Spare no expense." When he rejoined Lily, he kept his expression neutral, unwilling to disrupt their celebration with this new concern. That evening, however, he gently broached the subject. "Lily, I need to ask you something important. Did your mother have a sister, an aunt you might have met?" Lily's body immediately tensed. "Why? Did she find me?" The reaction confirmed Robert's suspicions. "Someone named Melissa Turner has come forward claiming to be your aunt. She wants custody of you." "No," Lily's voice rose in panic. "She's bad, Robert, really bad. You can't let her take me." "Slow down," Robert soothed, moving to sit beside her on the couch. "Tell me about her. What makes you afraid of her?" Lily's words tumbled out in a frightened rush. "She was always with my mom when they were doing drugs. Sometimes they'd both disappear for days and leave me alone. Once, some men came looking for money they said my mom owed, and when they couldn't find her, they took our TV and my mom's necklace instead. They said next time they'd take me." Robert's jaw tightened. "Did Melissa ever harm you directly?" "She hit me once when I ate some food that she wanted, and she told my mom I was too expensive to keep." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "After my mom left, I stayed hidden because I was afraid Melissa would find me and sell me to those men to pay for the drugs." Robert pulled her close, anger burning cold and steady within him. "That's not going to happen, Lily, I promise you." "But what if the judge says I have to go with her because she's family?" "Being related by blood doesn't automatically make someone family," Robert said firmly. "Real family protects you, cherishes you, puts your needs first. James and I will make sure the judge understands the situation." That night, after Lily finally fell asleep, in Robert's bed, unable to face being alone with her fears, he called James again. "I need a private investigator," he said without preamble. "The best you know. This Melissa Turner has Lily terrified, and from what I've heard, with good reason." The following morning, Robert met with Mike Donovan, a former police detective turned private investigator whom James had recommended. Mike's weathered face and direct manner suggested someone who had seen the darker sides of humanity without becoming cynical. "I need everything on Melissa Turner," Robert explained after outlining the situation. "Criminal record, financial history, associates, current living situation, anything that would demonstrate she's an unfit guardian." "And if I don't find anything concrete?" Mike asked bluntly. "Look harder," Robert replied. "According to Lily, this woman has connections to drug use and possibly trafficking. Those kinds of activities leave traces." While Mike began his investigation, Robert focused on maintaining normalcy for Lily. They continued their daily routines, breakfast together, tutoring sessions, afternoon activities, but he noticed a new wariness in her behavior. She was reluctant to leave the apartment, constantly checking windows and doors, sticking close to Robert whenever they ventured out. "No one is going to take you from me," he assured her repeatedly. "You're safe here." But the shadows under her eyes suggested nightmares had returned, the same ones that had plagued her during her first weeks with him, when sudden noises would make her flinch and thunderstorms sent her hiding in closets. 3. Days later, Mike called with preliminary findings. "Melissa Turner has quite a history," he reported. 3 drug possession charges, 1 conviction for petty theft, and multiple addresses over the past 5 years, none lasting longer than a few months. Currently works as a bartender at a club in Queens, but her income doesn't match her spending habits. Meaning? She's got a side hustle, probably dealing. I'm still working on confirming that. She's also suddenly flashing cash she didn't have. Before, paid her overdue rent, bought a used car last week. Timing coincides with her discovering Lily's whereabouts. She thinks she can get money from me, Robert realized. Filing for custody is leverage. Looks that way, Mike agreed. I'll keep digging. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Wednesday morning. On Tuesday evening, as Robert was reviewing documents James had prepared, his phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. "Mr. Harrison?" A woman's voice, slightly slurred. "This is Melissa Turner, Lily's aunt." Robert stiffened. "How did you get this number?" "Does it matter? We need to talk about my niece." "Any communication should go through my attorney." "Cut the formal crap," Melissa snapped. "We both know what's happening here. You're a rich guy who wants to play daddy, and I'm Lily's real family. But maybe we can work something out that benefits us both." "I'm listening," Robert said coldly, already recording the call with an app James had insisted he install for precisely this type of situation. "I'm thinking 50,000 would be reasonable. Cash. I sign away any claim to Lily. You get to be the hero. Everybody wins." "You're suggesting I pay you to abandon your niece?" Robert clarified, wanting her explicit confirmation. "I'm suggesting a business transaction. You've got money. I've got a blood claim to the kid. Simple supply and demand. And if I refuse, then I'll see you in court tomorrow, and I'll tell the judge how you manipulated a vulnerable child away from her loving family during a difficult time. How you're using your wealth to buy a child because you're a lonely old man." "I see." Robert kept his tone neutral. "And if I agree, how would this transaction occur?" "Tonight, Cash. I'll text you the address. Come alone." After ending the call, Robert immediately contacted James, forwarding the recording. "This is exactly what we needed," James confirmed. "Clear evidence of attempted extortion. I'll alert the judge immediately. Don't engage with her further. And absolutely do not meet her tonight." "Understood," Robert agreed, though part of him wished for a direct confrontation with the woman who had contributed to Lily's trauma. That night, Robert found Lily sitting on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, despite the mild evening temperature. Her small face was turned toward the sky, though Manhattan's light pollution obscured all but the brightest stars. "Can't sleep?" he asked, joining her. She shook her head. "Thinking about tomorrow?" "Try not to worry. James is very good at his job, and we have strong evidence that your aunt isn't a suitable guardian." "What if it's not enough?" Lily's voice was small. "What if I have to go with her?" "That won't happen," Robert said with more certainty than he felt. "But even in the worst-case scenario, I wouldn't stop fighting for you. Not ever." She turned to look at him, her expression suddenly older than her years. "My real dad did that. Fought for me, I mean, before the accident." It was the first time she'd mentioned her father. "Tell me about him." "He was nice, worked really hard. When he came home, he'd always bring me a little something, a candy bar or a hair clip. Nothing expensive, but he never forgot." Her voice grew softer. "He didn't like my mom's friends, especially Melissa. They fought about it a lot." "He sounds like he loved you very much," Robert said. Gently. "He did." Lily pulled the blanket tighter. "After the accident, everything changed. Mom started using more drugs, bringing scary people home. She said we needed money since Dad was gone." "I'm so sorry you went through that." "Sometimes I dream he's still alive looking for me." Her voice cracked slightly. "But then I wake up." Robert reached out, carefully putting an arm around her shoulders. "I can't replace your father, Lily. I wouldn't try to. But I can promise to care for you with the same devotion, to always put your needs first, just as he would have wanted." Lily leaned against him, her small body relaxing slightly. "I know. That's why I want to stay with you." They sat in silence, for a while watching the city lights shimmer against the night sky. "Robert," Lily finally said, her voice heavy with approaching sleep, "if the judge asks me tomorrow, I'm going to tell her that I choose you, that you're my family now." Something tightened in Robert's chest, a feeling so powerful it was almost painful. "I'm honored," he said softly, "and I choose you too, Lily, every day." As he carried her sleeping form to bed moments later, Robert felt a fierce determination unlike anything he'd experienced in his business career. Tomorrow's hearing wasn't just another negotiation or corporate battle. It was a fight for something irreplaceable, the child who had somehow become the center of his world in just a few short weeks. And unlike his illness, an enemy he could treat but not directly confront, this was a battle he could actively wage. Melissa Turner had severely underestimated what Robert Harrison was willing to do to protect what mattered most to him. Tomorrow she would learn that lesson firsthand. The emergency hearing was held in Judge Martinez's chambers rather than the formal courtroom, creating a more intimate setting that still managed to feel tense with anticipation. Robert sat with James on one side of a conference table, while Melissa Turner and her hastily acquired legal aid attorney occupied the other. Lily waited outside with a court-appointed child advocate, spared from witnessing the proceedings directly. Melissa looked nothing like Lily, Robert noted. Where the child had delicate features and thoughtful eyes, her alleged aunt had a hard-edged beauty deteriorated by what he assumed were years of substance abuse. She wore clothes that seemed newly purchased, her hair freshly colored, in an obvious attempt to present a respectable appearance. Judge Martinez began by addressing the unusual circumstances. This is an emergency hearing to address Ms. Turner's petition to overturn the temporary guardianship granted to Mr. Harrison. Ms. Turner claims biological priority as the maternal aunt of the minor child. Melissa's attorney presented her case, first emphasizing family bonds and blood relations. Your Honor, while Mr. Harrison's intentions may be admirable, the child belongs with actual family. Ms. Turner has been searching for her niece since her sister's unfortunate disappearance and was devastated to discover the child had been taken in by a stranger. Robert maintained his composure, though the mischaracterization of his relationship with Lily as that of a stranger made his jaw tighten. And where was Ms. Turner during the months Lily was homeless? James countered when it was his turn. By the child's own account, she was living on the streets for weeks before Mr. Harrison found her. I was looking everywhere, Melissa interjected, her voice cracking with what Robert recognized as practiced emotion. Rachel, my sister, and I had a falling out. I didn't know she had left Lily behind. Judge Martinez raised a hand. Please address the court through your attorney, Ms. Turner. James continued, his tone measured. Your Honor, we have serious concerns about Ms. Turner's suitability as a guardian. Mr. Harrison has provided a stable home where Lily is thriving. Removing her now would cause significant emotional harm. The child's well-being is indeed my primary concern, Judge Martinez acknowledged. However, family reunification is generally prioritized when possible. This was the opening James had been waiting for. Your Honor, regarding Ms. Turner's claim, we have evidence that calls into question both her motivations and her fitness as a guardian. With the judge's permission, James played the recorded phone conversation. Melissa's face drained of color as her own voice filled the room, explicitly offering to sell her rights to Lily for $50,000. This is a clear case of attempted extortion, James concluded. Ms. Turner has no genuine interest in the child's welfare. She saw an opportunity to exploit Mr. Harrison's resources. This recording was obtained illegally, Melissa's attorney protested. New York is a one-party consent state for recordings, James countered smoothly. Mr. Harrison was well within his rights to record a conversation to which he was a party. Judge Martinez studied Melissa with new scrutiny. Ms. Turner, would you care to explain this conversation? He's twisting things, Melissa insisted, her composed facade crumbling. I was just trying to test him, to see if he really cared about Lily or if he was just collecting her like rich people do with exotic pets. By offering to sell your niece, Judge Martinez's tone conveyed her skepticism. The hearing continued, with James presenting additional evidence from Mike Donovan's investigation, Melissa's criminal history, unstable housing situation, and suspicious financial activities. By the time they finished, even Melissa's attorney looked defeated. In light of this evidence, Judge Martinez ruled, I'm denying Ms. Turner's petition and upholding Mr. Harrison's temporary guardianship. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order prohibiting Ms. Turner from contacting either Mr. Harrison or Lily without court approval. As they exited the chambers, Melissa caught Robert's arm in the hallway. This isn't over, she hissed, her eyes narrowed. You think you've won, but you don't know everything about that kid. Before Robert could respond, a court officer intervened, escorting Melissa away. James placed a steadying hand on Robert's shoulder. Ignore her. She's just lashing out because she lost her payday. But something in Melissa's tone, not just anger, but a hint of knowing malice, lingered in Robert's mind as they collected Lily and headed home. Later that evening, while Lily was immersed in a new book Robert had purchased to celebrate their victory, he called Mike Donovan. I need you to dig deeper, Robert instructed, not just on Melissa Turner but on Lily's background, her father, the accident Lily mentioned, Anything you can find." "Any particular reason?" Mike asked. "Something Melissa said. It might be nothing, just spite, but I'd rather know if there's anything that could come back to haunt us in the adoption process." 2 days later, Mike requested a meeting in person. Rather than providing his findings over the phone, a request that immediately put Robert on alert. They arranged to meet at Robert's office, away from the penthouse and Lily's curious ears. "I found some interesting things," Mike began, spreading folders across Robert's desk, starting with Lily's father, David Reynolds. He worked for Eagle Construction as a site supervisor until his passing about 18 months ago. Robert frowned. "Eagle Construction? That's one of my company's subcontractors." "Exactly," Mike confirmed. "Reynolds was supervising the early foundation work on your Riverside development when there was an accident. A support beam collapsed, killing him instantly." The revelation hit Robert like a physical blow. One of his projects, one of his buildings, responsible for the event that had sent Lily's life spiraling into chaos. "Was there negligence involved?" he asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Mike nodded grimly. The investigation found safety protocols weren't properly followed. Eagle Construction settled with Rachel Turner, Lily's mother, for a substantial sum, $2 million, to avoid a wrongful action lawsuit against both them and, by extension, Harrison Enterprises. $2 million. Robert's mind raced. If Rachel Turner received that kind of settlement, why did Lily end up homeless? "That's where it gets interesting," Mike continued. "The money disappeared within months. Rachel's bank records show large withdrawals, often followed by no clear purchases, given her known substance abuse issues." "She blew through her daughter's inheritance on drugs," Robert concluded, disgust evident in his voice. "Most likely. But here's what's even more relevant to your situation." Mike pulled out another document. "David Reynolds left a will and a letter for Lily. The will directed that half the settlement should be placed in a trust for Lily's education, accessible when she turned 18. The letter was a personal message to his daughter." "But Lily's never mentioned either of these." "Because she probably doesn't know about them. According to the attorney who handled the settlement, all documents were given to Rachel Turner as Lily's legal guardian. The trust was never established." Robert leaned back in his chair, processing this information. So Melissa knew about the settlement money. That's why she suddenly wanted Lily, not for ransom from me, but to try to access whatever might be left of the settlement. "That would be my guess," Mike agreed. "I've also been looking for the letter from Reynolds to his daughter. Haven't located it yet, but I'm following a lead with the law firm that handled the settlement." "Find it," Robert instructed. "That letter belongs to Lily, not Rachel or Melissa." Over the next week, Robert said nothing to Lily about these discoveries. He wanted complete information before approaching such a sensitive topic, especially since it involved her father. Meanwhile, he discreetly began investigating Eagle Construction's safety practices, disturbed to discover this wasn't their first serious violation. 9 days after their initial meeting, Mike delivered a plain envelope to Robert's office. Found it in the law firm's archived files. They kept a copy of all settlement documents, including this. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed simply, "For Lily, when you need to remember how loved you are." Robert stared at it, feeling the weight of responsibility. This was perhaps the last communication from a father to his daughter, words meant for Lily's eyes, not his. Yet he needed to know if it contained anything that might affect their legal proceedings or Lily's emotional well-being. After careful consideration, Robert decided to open it, promising himself he would share it with Lily regardless of its contents. The letter inside was handwritten on simple stationery. "My dearest Lily, if you're reading this, something has happened to me, and I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to watch you grow up. There's so much I wanted to teach you, so many moments I wanted to share. Please know that from the very first moment I held you, you became my entire world. Life might be difficult right now. Your mom struggles sometimes, and I've always tried to be the steady one for both of you. Without me there, things might get confusing or scary. If that happens, remember that you are stronger than you know. You get that from both of us. Your Mom's fierce independence and my stubborn persistence. I'm leaving instructions that you should be taken care of financially, until you're old enough to make your own way. Use that opportunity to get an education, to follow your dreams, to build a life that makes you happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. And Lily, if someday someone new comes into your life, someone who looks at you with the same love that I feel, let them in. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who chooses to stay when they have every reason to leave. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. When you look up at night, know that my love for you is just as vast and eternal. Always and forever, Dad. Robert carefully refolded the letter, his vision blurred with unexpected tears. The simple eloquence of a father's love, a love he'd never experienced himself, either as recipient or giver until Lily entered his life, moved him profoundly. The letter also confirmed his suspicions about the missing trust fund. After thanking Mike for his thorough investigation, Robert contacted his corporate attorneys, instructing them to prepare for possible legal action against both Eagle Construction for their safety violations and potentially against Rachel Turner, or Melissa Turner for misappropriation of funds meant for Lily. That evening, Robert sat with Lily on their balcony, their nightly ritual of watching the sunset now firmly established. He had brought the letter home but was still contemplating the right moment to share it. "You're quiet tonight," Lily observed, always perceptive to shifts in his mood. "I've been doing some research," Robert began carefully, "about your father." Lily's body tensed slightly. "Why?" "Because he's an important part of who you are, and because—" Robert took a deep breath. "Because I discovered that he worked on one of my company's construction projects. That's where his accident happened." Her eyes widened. "Your building?" "A building my company was developing, yes. The actual construction was handled by a subcontractor, but ultimately it was my project." He watched her face carefully, afraid of seeing accusation or anger. Instead, she seemed to be processing the connection. "So, you knew my dad?" "No. I never met him personally. My company is large with many projects running simultaneously, but I wish I had known him. From everything I've learned, he was an exceptional man who loved you very much." Lily nodded slowly. "He was the best dad." "I found something that belongs to you," Robert continued, reaching into his pocket for the envelope. "Your father left. This for you. It was supposed to be given to you after the accident, but it wasn't." Lily stared at the envelope, her name written in her father's handwriting. Her hands trembled slightly as she took it. "Can I read it alone?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." She disappeared into her bedroom, the door closing softly behind her. Robert remained on the balcony, giving her privacy while remaining close enough if she needed him. Nearly an hour passed before her door reopened. When she emerged, her eyes were red from crying, but there was a calmness to her expression. She sat beside Robert again, leaning against his side in a gesture of trust that had become familiar between them. "He knew," she said simply. "Knew what?" "That someone like you might come along someday." She handed him the letter, giving permission to read it. "See? Right here, about someone who looks at me with love, and how family isn't always about blood." Robert read the passage she indicated, touched by her interpretation. "Your father was very wise. He also said there was money for me, for school and stuff." "Yes, there was supposed to be," Robert confirmed. "There was a settlement after the accident, money that should have been set aside for your future. I'm working to find out what happened to it." "Mum probably used it for drugs," Lily said with the direct pragmatism children sometimes show toward painful truths. "That's why she got worse after Dad's accident. She suddenly had lots of money." "I'm sorry, Lily. You deserved better." She shrugged, a gesture too world-weary for her years. "It doesn't matter now, I have you." "Yes, you do," Robert affirmed. "And I'm going to make sure you have everything your father wanted for you: education, opportunities, security. But more importantly, love. The kind he would have given you himself." Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Robert sat in his office reviewing the financial investigation Mike had compiled. The settlement money had indeed been squandered, withdrawn in large amounts and never deposited in any traceable account. Rachel Turner had disappeared 6 months ago, her current whereabouts unknown. Local inquiries suggested she might have left the state with a new boyfriend, abandoning Lily in the process. The knowledge that his company, however indirectly, had contributed to the chain of events that orphaned Lily weighed heavily on Robert. He couldn't change the past, but he could ensure justice and security for her future. Tomorrow he would set in motion the legal process to recover whatever could be salvaged of her inheritance and to establish a new trust that would ensure her financial security regardless of what happened with his health. As he prepared for bed, Robert checked on Lily one last time. She had fallen asleep with her father's letter clutched in one hand, the paper already showing signs of being frequently handled and refolded. Carefully, he removed it from her grip and placed it on her nightstand within easy reach. "I'll take care of her," he whispered, a promise to the man he'd never met, but with whom he now shared the most important connection of his life. "With everything I have, for as long as I have." In that moment, watching over this child who had unexpectedly become his purpose, Robert felt a strange sense of peace. The universe had worked in mysterious ways, bringing Lily to him through a tragic connection neither of them had known existed. Perhaps it wasn't coincidence after all, but something more like destiny, a chance to heal wounds neither of them had created, but both had suffered. 1 year had passed since the day Robert found Lily in that Queen's playground, a year of profound transformation for both of them. The penthouse that had once resembled a museum now bore the unmistakable signs of a child's presence. Colorful artwork adorning the refrigerator, a bookshelf overflowing with children's literature beside Robert's business tomes, a corner of the living room dedicated to Lily's growing collection of science experiments. Today was special, the anniversary of their first meeting, which they had decided to celebrate as their family birthday. Robert had taken the day off work, something that would have been unthinkable in his previous life, and they had spent the morning at the Museum of Natural History, where Lily's fascination with the dinosaur exhibits had left her buzzing with facts she eagerly shared during lunch. "Did you know T-Rex couldn't actually run? They think it walked really fast, like power walking," she explained between bites of her sandwich. "And its arms weren't useless. They could lift like 400 pounds each." "Impressive," Robert remarked, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Maybe we should get you that paleontology kit you were looking at in the gift shop." "Really, but it was expensive." "It's our special day. Besides, future scientists need proper equipment." Lily beamed, her face lighting up with the unrestrained joy that had become increasingly common as she settled into the security of her new life. At 9.5 years old, she was flourishing, excelling at the private school Robert had enrolled her in, making friends, and gradually shedding the hypervigilance that had characterized her early days with him. The adoption had been finalized 3 months earlier, a day marked by celebration and, for Robert, profound gratitude. Judge Martinez, who had overseen the process from the beginning, had smiled as she signed the final documents. "In my 20 years on the bench," she had commented, "I've rarely seen a non-biological family bond form so naturally and completely." As they left the restaurant, Robert checked his watch. "We have just enough time to get to our appointment." "What appointment?" Lily asked, her curiosity piqued. "I thought we were going to the park next. It's a surprise, part of our celebration." The taxi took them to a small law office in Midtown, where James Whitfield waited with a portfolio of documents. "Everything's prepared as you requested," James informed Robert, then turned to Lily with a warm smile. "Hello, Miss Harrison, you're looking well." Lily had chosen to take Robert's surname after the adoption, a decision that had moved him deeply. She returned James's greeting with the confidence she now showed around familiar adults, a far cry from the wary child who had once hidden behind Robert during their first legal meetings. "Lily," Robert began, once they were seated in James's conference room, "do you remember how we talked about your father's letter and the trust fund he wanted to create for you?" She nodded, suddenly serious. "The money Mom spent." "Yes, well, after a lot of legal work, we've managed to recover some of it," he nodded to James, who slid a document across the table. "This establishes a new educational trust in your name," James explained to Lily. It combines the recovered funds, about $300,000, with an additional contribution from Robert. How much additional? Lily asked, glancing between them. $5 million, Robert answered simply. Lily's eyes widened. $5 million? Your father wanted to ensure you had opportunities, Robert explained. I'm honoring his wishes, just on a larger scale. This money will cover any education you choose to pursue, college, graduate school, even studying abroad. If you'd like. But that's too much, Lily protested. Even for college. The remainder will be available to you when you turn 25, James continued. To use however you see fit, starting a business, buying a home, further education, travel. There's something else, Robert added, pulling another folder from his briefcase. These are shares in Harrison Enterprises, transferred to your name, 20% of the company to be exact. James raised an eyebrow. This hadn't been part of their previous discussions. Robert, that's a significant transfer. I'm aware, Robert replied calmly. It's exactly what I want. Lily looked between them, clearly overwhelmed. I don't understand. Why would you give me part of your company? Because you're my daughter now, and my heir, Robert explained gently. This is what I promised you that first week, remember? When I asked if you wanted to be my heiress. She nodded slowly. But I didn't understand what that meant then. Neither did I, not really, Robert admitted. I thought I was offering you financial security, but what we've built goes far beyond that. This is about legacy, Lily. Not just money or property, but values, purpose, the impact we have on the world. They spent the next hour reviewing the documents, with James explaining the technical aspects in terms Lily could understand. Though she clearly didn't grasp all the financial implications, she listened attentively, asking surprisingly insightful questions that made both men exchange impressed glances. As they left the office, Lily was uncharacteristically quiet. Robert gave her space, knowing she was processing big concepts. It wasn't until they were walking through Central Park, heading toward their favorite ice cream vendor, that she finally spoke. Robert, can I ask you something important? Anything. If I own part of your company now, does that mean that I help run it someday? He smiled at the concern in her voice. Only if you want to. These shares give you options, not obligations. You might choose to be involved with Harrison Enterprises someday, or you might decide to become a paleontologist who digs up dinosaurs in Mongolia. The point is, the choice will be yours. She considered this, relief evident in her expression. I think I'd like to learn about the business stuff eventually. Not now, but someday, is that okay? More than okay, Robert assured her. Whenever you're ready, I'll teach you everything I know. And what if you get sick again? The question emerged hesitantly, though Robert's health had improved. Dramatically, his experimental treatment proving more successful than even Dr. Larson had predicted, Lily remained acutely aware of the possibility of losing another parent. If that happens, Robert said carefully, you'll still be taken care of. James would manage the trust until you're older, and I've arranged for Sarah to be your guardian. Sarah Jenkins, the social worker initially assigned to their case, had become a close family friend, often joining them for dinner or weekend outings. But you're getting better, right? The doctors said so. Yes, they did. My last scan showed significant improvement. Dr. Larson uses words like remarkable and unprecedented. Robert squeezed her hand reassuringly. I'm not going anywhere if I can help it, Lily. We have too many plans. Their evening continued with a special dinner at home prepared by a private chef Robert had hired for the occasion. As they enjoyed their meal on the balcony, watching the sunset paint the Manhattan skyline in shades of gold and pink, Robert presented Lily with one final gift, a leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. I've been working on something this past year, he explained. A book about us, about how we found each other and became a family. This is your copy of the manuscript. Lily opened the journal reverently, finding pages filled with Robert's elegant handwriting. The title page read simply, From Ending to Love Our Story. I thought maybe someday when you're older, You might want to know every detail of how our lives changed that day in the park, Robert continued. How finding you gave me a reason to fight when I'd nearly given up. How you saved me, in every way that matters. Lily traced the words on the title page with her finger. Can we read it together? I'd like that very much. They began that very night, with Lily curled against Robert's side on the couch as he read the first chapter aloud. It detailed his diagnosis, the dark days that followed, and the aimless walk that had led him to that playground in Queens, all written with a candor appropriate for Lily's eventual adult understanding. It's like a real book, she marveled when he finished the first chapter. It is a real book, Robert corrected gently. Just not one for public consumption. This is just for us and perhaps someday for your children if you choose to have them. My children, Lily repeated, seeming startled by the concept of that distant future. Would you be their grandfather? The question, so simple yet loaded with meaning, caught Robert off guard. Yes, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I would be honored to be their grandfather. Later, after Lily had gone to bed, Robert stood on the balcony alone, reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From a terminal diagnosis and solitary existence to becoming a father and beating the odds medically. None of it had been planned, all of it transformative. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Larson confirming their appointment for the following week. The experimental treatment had reduced his tumor by nearly 70%, putting him in the category of patients with the best prognosis. While not technically in remission, he had moved from terminal to chronic, his condition now something to be managed rather than surrendered to. The medical team remained fascinated by his case, particularly the correlation between his psychological state and physical improvement. They had documented the timeline meticulously, his decline before meeting Lily, the plateau when she entered his life, and the remarkable improvement as their bond deepened. While careful not to claim direct causation, Dr. Larson had noted that Robert's case supported emerging research on the powerful connection between emotional well-being and physical health. Robert turned at the sound of the balcony door sliding open. Lily stood there in her pajamas, hair tousled from her pillow. Can't sleep? He asked. She shook her head. I was thinking about today, all the stuff at the lawyer's office. Was it too much? We can talk more about it tomorrow when you're rested. No, it's not that. She came to stand beside him at the railing, looking out at the city lights. I was thinking about what makes somebody rich. An interesting philosophical question, Robert noted, curious where her thoughts were leading. Before I met you, I thought rich meant having a lot of money and fancy things, Lily continued, her young voice earnest in the quiet night. And you have those things, so you are rich that way. But, Robert prompted, sensing there was more. But I think there's another kind of rich. Like how my first dad was rich in love even though we didn't have much money. And how you're rich in both ways. She looked up at him, her expression serious. And now I'm rich too, not just because of the trust fund stuff, but because I have you. Robert felt his throat tighten with emotion. That's a very wise observation, Lily. The thing is, she continued, I think the second kind of rich is more important, because all the money in the world wouldn't make you happy if you were still alone. You're absolutely right, Robert agreed softly. Before you came into my life, I had every material comfort, but I was impoverished in all the ways that truly matter. Lily nodded, satisfied that he understood. So even though I'm your heir for the money stuff, I think the most important thing I inherited from you isn't any of that. It's learning how to care about someone else more than yourself. Robert was momentarily speechless, humbled by the profound insight from this child who had experienced more loss and hardship in her short life than most adults. When he finally found his voice, it was thick with emotion. I believe that's the greatest inheritance anyone can receive or give, he said. And for what it's worth, I've learned that same lesson from you. Lily smiled, leaning against his side as they looked out at the city together, no longer two separate individuals brought together by chance, but a family bound by choice, by love, by the kind of wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars or property deeds. The journey ahead would hold challenges, Robert knew. There would be questions about his health, inevitable growing pains as Lily entered adolescence, perhaps even renewed legal battles if Melissa or Rachel Turner ever resurfaced. But facing those challenges together seemed not just manageable but meaningful, part of the rich tapestry of family life he'd never expected to experience. For a man who had once measured success in acquisitions and profit margins, Robert had discovered a profoundly different metric: the quiet joy of watching Lily grow, the privilege of guiding her development, the daily moments of connection that had no monetary value, yet were priceless beyond measure. "It's getting late," he said gently. "Back to bed?" Lily nodded but lingered a moment longer. "Robert, I was thinking, would it be okay if I started calling you Dad? Not to replace my first dad, but because, well, because that's what you are now." "I would be honored," Robert replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "More than you know." She hugged him tightly, then padded back inside, leaving Robert alone with the night sky and a heart so full it seemed impossible it had ever known emptiness. In his pocket, he carried a small note Lily had given him earlier that day, part of her anniversary gift to him. Written in her careful handwriting, it contained words he knew he would treasure forever. "Thank you for finding me when I was lost. Thank you for asking me to be your heir. But most of all, thank you for being the dad my first dad would have wanted for me. I think he would like knowing we found each other. Love, Lily Harrison." Robert looked up at the stars. The same stars Lily's father had referenced in his letter, the same stars that had witnessed the unlikely intersection of their lives 1 year ago today. In that moment, under the vast canopy of night, Robert felt a profound sense of gratitude for the chance encounter that had saved them both, transforming an ending into a beginning, loss into love, strangers into family. It was, he reflected, the most valuable legacy he could possibly leave, not the buildings that bore his name or the wealth he had accumulated, but the love he had discovered in the most unexpected circumstances, and the child who would carry that love forward long after he was gone. "Thank you," he whispered to the universe that had brought them together, to the stars that would witness whatever came next in their remarkable journey, for everything. Dear listeners, we hope you've been moved by the journey of Robert and Lily, two souls who found each other at their lowest moments and created something beautiful together. To continue experiencing heartwarming stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist of equally captivating narratives. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring unique stories that explore life's complexity and the incredible power of human connection. What touched you most about Robert and Lily's story? We're eagerly waiting to read your thoughts in the comments below.